Have you ever wondered what happens at a financial planning consultation? Stay tuned and find out more. I'm Elizabeth Prindle. I have a certification in financial planning, certificate in financial planning, and I've been practicing in the industry for about 10 years. And I wanted to offer education and enablement content under accessible financial planning. And this is not to be construed for actual investment or financial advice in any way. Consult your own professionals for your own situation. But most of the prospective clients who come our way come to the free complimentary consultation with our firm with a lot of questions and maybe some nerves and trepidation. I mean, a lot of times they hadn't even discussed their finances amongst themselves as spouses in certain households. Perhaps they're facing some tremendous financial issues, big problems in tax world or investment land or unemployment and so on and so forth. Debt, that's another huge one. And there can be a lot of personal judgments on your own situation. Finding the right professional is a really important next step. And we can talk about all the ways people find financial planners, but I wanted to talk about what actually happens with a financial planning consultation that I would conduct. All right. Here we go. And let's make this a bit less distracting here. Okay. All right. So you're going to attend a Zoom meeting usually when you meet with me. If you want to meet in person, that can work as well. I will say there can be so many advantages to meeting digitally. One, you could be in the comfort of your own home. Two, if you have children and you'd otherwise need childcare, you could avoid that. Your children could be running around. It totally doesn't matter. I have kids. It's no big deal. I've had nursing mothers during the pandemic on our Zoom calls, completely welcomed and come as you are, right? I think this financial planning space has changed in that regard. But this is, again, meeting with an RIA or a firm for financial planning and investments. Our proposal template is pretty generic in terms of anything in gray we edit. We'll go in, I make a copy of this, I update the date of the proposal, your first and last name, and everything in white is just templated text. And the reason for that is because it doesn't exactly change client to client. When I have enough software tools in place, I use Calendly. I have also seen Google Appointments. There's lots of options out there. But when you book online and you can choose the date and time and you get an email invite to your calendar, so on and so forth, we offer an opportunity for our prospective clients to offer some background information. That's not critical. For the most part, I like going in with fresh eyes into a consultation. I do read what prospective clients do write about their situation. Maybe we have several 401ks and IRAs. We'd like a consolidation strategy. We are looking to retire in X amount of years, or we don't even know our trajectory towards retirement and would like to have a better understanding of how we get there and if we're doing the right things. There can be liquidation or liquidity or equity events in the companies you work for, so on and so forth. So we really like to say, here's the main deal. You want to know if you're on track for retirement. You want to do so in a tax advantage way as your household income has been increasing and plans to continue for the next several years. And you want to make sure you're planning for the family that you're building as well. That would be a really good summary for, a lot of people in a particular demographic. And that's what I'd want to put here. So if they read nothing else, they read that. The next section is where we'll actually type in notes. So, there's obviously some demographic data, household structure, children, ages, because if they're minor age children versus grown adult children, there's various questions. Certainly, if children are discussed, we like to see, are there any special needs? Are there any considerations in regards to a bit more involvement financially from parents beyond your standard 0 to 18-year child? And special needs is an area for that. There's also opportunities for trusts in place, provided many caveats there. We'll also ask you, Do you have aging parents? Are they alive, nearby? Financial, geographical, emotional, obligations. We do this because if, some people and clients we meet with end up having parents internationally and they'd like to send them money. They already are, and they'd like to continue doing so. It's also good if they aren't alive to ask a little bit more there. What's your family health history? Any long-term care, Alzheimer's, dementia? I always spell that wrong, guys. That's another set of questions that we like to ask because I'm not an insurance agent. I am not an actuarial expert by any means, but there are some knowable risks if your family health history includes some of these characteristics under long-term care. So Alzheimer's, dementia, or if any long-term care qualifying event, losing 2 out of the 6 daily activities of living. These are very important to know because there is some genetic component. It is not deterministic. And if we can know, then we can properly build in the plan. Long-term care is its own video as a topic and very fascinating and interesting. But for now, we'll stick to this. So, health history on both sides, if it's spouses or individually, you'll see by this point, we're 10 minutes in, haven't even talked numbers yet. So it's pretty lightweight in that regard, but we do cover a lot. Also, macro level, the reason why we take these notes, and sometimes we digest the notes after the call as well, so we can really be active listening and say, oh, okay, so I hear that your grandmother had dementia and she lived till 86 and she had otherwise been independent up through the age of 80. Do your parents, how do your parents take that family health history into account in their own situations? Are they retired? What's their financial situation like? Okay, so you're saying they have Social Security and a pension, and otherwise you think they're reasonably, covered. They do own their home outright, so that potentially could be an asset should they need additional in-home care or anything along those lines. So that's the nature of how it goes in terms of financial planning. I think if a financial planner is not asking you specifically about household structures, children, aging parents, siblings, are they nearby? What's the nature of the relationship? Contentious or healthy? We've seen it all. Everybody has a family. We all have things. So best to be honest and out with it. I have clients who have siblings who are special needs and they may need extra budgetary considerations. And if they can afford it as a sibling to their other sibling, they'd love to do that. And we'd like to put some boundaries on what that is. Not boundaries you can or you can't, just segmenting out some funds over their timelines that accounts for that. Then we start really looking at, the how did you meet versus what brings you to financial planning. Are you meeting with other advisors currently? Do you have any other advisors? What made you choose them? And what are you otherwise looking for? That comes up a lot because a lot of people we meet with, they have access to financial advisors and financial planners through another investment management firm. And I think that's great. We don't have a requirement that they move everything over to us. We have no requirement for investment management if they just want a standalone comprehensive financial plan. And we don't even say you should get rid of them. The first question is always, what do you pay them? How much are you paying for this other advisor? Is it 1%? Usually the industry average is 1% of the total account balance or assets under management. So if you have 4 accounts, you'd add those up, multiply by 1%, and that's going to be your annual fee. But if it's assessed quarterly, either previous quarter or in advance of the next quarter, then account balances shift throughout the year, and it might be slightly different if you actually took your 4 quarterly debits and or payments and added it up to what a 1 year would be. But the 1 year estimate is as a ballpark. It gives you an idea. Just because I think this is an important issue, 1% for AUM or assets under management, also known as 100 basis points or 100 bips. These are inside baseball terms. I don't know how much I love them. Any business you're in long enough, acronyms are helpful to quickly disseminate information internally, inside baseball terms. Great. I don't think they're helpful for clients. So you'll have an account balance. I'm going to use just a moderate household, 500,000. You might have more assets outside of that too, right? Some firms have minimums. You have to be at least this amount, 500, to be in their firm and get advice. Some firms have no minimums. Some firms require all of your assets versus just maybe one account or two. So it doesn't represent everything you own in some cases. And that should be totally fine. It really comes down to the client's best interest. And so I can't say if there are rules or rules of thumb regarding this. I can't say there's a rule that if you pay an advisor 1%, that you can't also pay a fee-only financial planner. But you should know how much you're being charged. So let's calculate it. So the end of quarter balance is 500,000, or for the year, we'll say December 31st statement balance, ending balance. Even though it's easy math, I'll use a calculator. So $5,000 a year. So 1% for $500,000 managed is $5,000 per year. Now, it's probably going to be assessed quarterly, maybe monthly, and sometimes financial planning fees are annually. You'll have to look at your statement, or at least make your rep somewhat work for you in terms of clearly outlining these terms and information. You paid for it. So quarterly, it's about $1,250 a quarter. It's pretty good, not bad. There are firms that charge more, 1.25 up to 2%. So per quarter, 2% fee looks like $2,500. And we can then, for the year, 2% on 500,000 is $10,000 every year that they're managing your assets. But if they are garnering on average 6 to 8% annual returns, charging you 2, your net return after fees is about, 4 to 6%. So still above inflation by all metrics and measures, average annual inflation, not 1 year of inflation. So it's important that any consumer I'm helping at the proposal level understand the fees that they're paying for. All right, we belabored that. Per year at 1% AUM. There's going to be a lot of terms like that. And it's important to say, stop your advisor and say, I'm not sure I understand what you mean. But at some point, let's start looking at backgrounds and employment. What do you do? Who's your employer? And that's actually a really good question because, for instance, I've worked with a lot of employees at Apple. And so I have somewhat of a familiarity with a lot of the common Apple employee benefits. There was a time frame where you saw a lot more from Alphabet, previously Google as well. So we had some familiarity with theirs too. There can be different niches or niches, nursing, certain, biotech firms. So it's good to understand this question in dialogue with your advisor. Who's their ideal client? That's another one to ask your advisor. And, at this point, we're really trying to understand our clients. I can say in a proposal at this point, based on these questions, a lot of times they do, I like this one too. How did you meet? How long have you been married together? It's a real humanizing experience. I really do get to know clients. Once we're at the data phase, that's when I think I really fall in love with clients in terms of, oh, this is the life they want to build for themselves. Oh, look, he does the cooking and she buys the groceries, or in the way they do their budgets. And I do develop this very strong fondness for my clients in the planning process. I get to be intimately aware with so many of their details that maybe nobody has ever seen in aggregate in their lives. And I just am fascinated. I do not judge. It's a judgment-free experience. Judgment is totally separate from the financial planning process. I don't care. I don't care what somebody spends on. If I care, it's because the client cares. I had a client once who was very concerned about her kind of discretionary entertainment, dining and drinking out bills. That doesn't matter to me. How you spend your money is not so important. Now, I can evaluate it with you, but that would be seeking your input, your judgment on it, which is I value this pie chart in my life, but my spending is a different pie chart breakdown of my values. I don't actually value going out and entertainment except for like free things. Then we can shrink the entertainment eating out budget a little bit intentionally. Now, it's easier said than done, but at least there's a framework, right? To say, why you're experiencing judgment about it versus not. There are probably other areas of spend that you'd like to spend more in. And I want to know those too. And we should be focusing efforts in that direction as well. So very humanizing process, very judgment-free process. This is because these are the special questions involved to say, I'm already starting to picture your plan as we go. I already say, you have a certain level of spend we need to recreate. There's some health insurance and retirement that we need to be thinking about. There potentially could be aging parents that need assistance and help. There could be a sibling that needs help. There's children. So if they're minor age children, are we paying for college? And if they're adult children, are there any lingering expenses that we support them with? And or are there existing loans in your name or theirs that you may or may not want to help out with? So I'm already kind of picturing those things in the goals layout for this potential client, which I'm just kind of talking into myself in air. So these questions are next. Occasionally, we'll meet with a single spouse in a household, and there is relationship strife, potential separation, approaching divorce, etc. In those situations, typically there is a hold off from planning. It's not exactly in a client's best interest if they're married to only meet with one of the spouses. It's not to say that there aren't caveats, exceptions, and disclaimers on why that may be appropriate, but each of the 50 states has laws around marriage and what that means with assets. So in order to put a client's best interest first, all of those considerations, like California, I'm in California, it's a community property state. When you marry, it's a joyous occasion, but it's also an occasion governed by the laws of the state of California. And those laws with community property state, as of the date of marriage, 50% of what's earned and acquired is split evenly between each spouse. So, or 100% is split 50-50. Doesn't matter who earned it, if it was stay-at-home parent or not. It doesn't matter if one spouse wasn't aware or didn't sign off on it. Globally speaking, that's the rule. There are some exceptions for separate property that's maintained its separateness from before the marriage and inherited property that's maintained its separateness. And that means completely separated accounts that are individually titled, not jointly held, and there's no commingling. We don't take the joint checking account to pay the property tax on the inherited townhouse. That's the logic there. Again, I'm not an attorney. This is something you want to talk to in a prenuptial setting or with an estate planning attorney, not necessarily a financial planner who can at least outline some rough sketch of what the financial implications could be or setting some boundaries on those. So that's important. I mean, that's kind of the other side of the question of like, hey, how long have you been married together? And when they light up and talk about that, is a sweet moment, but it isn't always. And those are, we're here. We're here to listen. Everybody, again, has stories, right? I'm married. Everybody has relationships. Everybody has families. So it's just talking all these taboo topics in 1 hour on Zoom with a stranger. That's a big deal. So if you can, the more forthright you can be, the better. Emotions are okay too. I've had people cry on Zoom meetings or in person about various things. Not always relational, maybe fewer relational. Some conflict within couples in front of me, and some regrets about maybe some debts and choices in life. And That's good. I think it's good to feel the feelings. I'm not a therapist, but I want to support my clients through that ultimately, because money is a number, it's a symbol, and it represents stuff. And it doesn't always represent a dollar. Money represents our upbringings, and that's what we ask about, Um, money philosophies. And what is your money philosophy? What's your general sense of, living within your means, saving for retirement, etc. If we're talking employer, we can talk about, retirement accounts, are you saving? How much? Employer match. In this setting, it can be helpful because, again, I could build a plan off of this without ever, getting to a contract. I am already thinking through those issues. Um, Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they feel bad that they haven't. Then I could say, oh, well, if you have a match, consider contributing to the match even before you do planning. It'll set you off to a good start, right? If it seems too much on your paycheck, then and they match when you get to 4%, just do 2%. I mean, get something and that'll be better off, right? I always try to end a proposal with like, even if you don't plan with me, here's a quick hit list of 1 to 10 items, depending on the person, what you can do. I do that especially with clients that I'm nervous about their total asset value and whether, I mean, do I want to be another expense for them? Frankly, no, I don't. I want to be very mindful that they can benefit this. So if there's like student loan issues, then I can advise a free resource they can consider beforehand. If they have tricky retirement funding and how they're going to afford their lifestyle, I can encourage them. Particularly, this can happen for, just happens to be gendered at this point. It won't be forever, but women who are in their 50s and 60s, they were married, but they're divorced. They never remarried, but they were married previously to their spouse for greater than 10 years. In that case, there's some interesting implications for their Social Security, particularly if they took time off of work to raise children. So I want to be able to tell them, here are some considerations to think through and take a look at that are maybe better off than they would have thought. So certainly there, that's what we're asking. We ask this for both spouses. It can be hard as a planner in a proposal meeting with a client. I'm speaking on behalf of myself here. How to approach it in a meeting for financial planning when one spouse is by word and minute dominating the conversation with the planner. I am female, I'm married, so discussing things with a wife who is looking for financial planning makes sense. And we'll have a lot of the conversation. I just had a proposal like this a week ago. And it's going to be on me and my efforts to make sure I'm drawing in the other spouse. It may be the husband, it may be the wife. Who knows? But I have to make sure that I'm drawing them in so that I get their perspective too. And they may share a lot of perspectives financially. They may also have some divergences. And those are all elements that can be beneficial. It's good to know where you agree and where you don't in a household and how a planner can leverage those behaviors to work to each of your advantages. So certainly I'm thinking about that from that context. So couples can hopefully feel forthright in saying, well, he's the spender, I'm the saver, so on and so forth. Let's see. If there's children, I like to talk about college education and private school, both in the context of what each of the spouses or single parent have experienced in their own history for their K through 12. Did they go to public or private? Did they find positives and negatives about it? And how they funded if they went to college, how they funded it, what their thoughts are there, what they'd like to do. I may give some roughshod estimates of how, most people afford college this way, this way, this way, and so on and so forth. But it gives me a good sense of, okay, is this truly a top goal that they're looking to accomplish? Or is it okay for them to say, we did the first 18, this is on them? If we can help, great. It's not succinctly a specific goal. And the comparison there would be the price of a private 4-year private university is about, if we include all in, right? Little incidentals, little allowance, travel, tuition, books, etc. It's about 70,000 now. It grows at a 6.3% or 6.3% interest rate or inflation rate. So over 20 years, for 4 years at 70,000 in today's dollars, not only is that going to be a huge number, but to get there and save for that number is going to be huge. So we do have clients. Thankfully, they have the net worth to sustain that savings for their future education goals for their children. However, there are some clients that say, at a basic amount, I have 4 kids. If they go to state schools, I'm totally happy. I want to help them each 10,000 per year for 4 years each. Then that's something that we can leverage. So we have conversations so we can break that down in my head. And I know how the mechanics and the building blocks of the plan will go. So that's college education in private schools. Let's see what else. I mean, there is a question about retirement timelines. I think it depends on the age of the clients, first and foremost. But preparedness, which isn't always a matter of being prepared financially. It could be, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to spend your time? We have a lot of clients, men and women, who are exceptional at their professions. They will be on track to leaving a company well before age 65, which is somewhat of a default retirement age. And they'll say, can I retire? And we can say, yes, you can retire. And you can retire at this really healthy spend amount each year. That's like super exciting conversation to have with my clients. Like that's a champagne cheers moment. I love that moment. I really do. It doesn't stop the planning. It's just a nice moment to congratulate them at that point. But they are also the same clients who end up saying, oh, well, I have 4 consulting opportunities when I quit work. So I'm going to start taking those on. And I think for the right person, if you're boundaried, that can work. But if you truly want to retire, it's good to think about there's a vacuum effect. The more time you have, the more willing you'll just continue on filling your time with what you were doing. So in order to make shifts and say, no, if I work, it'll only be 5 hours a week. It has to be a lot of intentionality in your scheduling, your boundaries, how you relate to project work, and call it a day essentially when your hours are done, even though maybe in another iteration of your life you would have spent 60 hours a week on it. Those are some interesting components. And the vacuum effect is just, if you don't fill the time with something, anything, and have that list growing, and it's going to shift and change, then it's easy to fall back on work and employment, or feel kind of bummed out about losing a sense of community that work provides and social life, as well as feeling competent and looked to for answers and advice. So I think that's a very important category of what we like to flesh out. If you're in your 50s and 60s, it's a more relevant proposal level question. If you're in your 20s and 30s, it's a little bit more challenging. I think like longstanding stay-at-home moms have a pretty easy transition into retirement. They've already kind of been building their own schedule and making their day over and over again. So, just lots of things. I don't want to make broad-based assumptions, but from the clients that I've worked with, these are some of the things that have come out. Great. So talked about family structures. Another one might be when it comes to the money side, how are expenses and income flows, managed in the households. Increasingly, folks that I meet in their 20s and 30s and 40s who are married have some sort of Splitwise or Venmos and things like that. They split things. They more and more often do not have a completely joint financial ecosystem. They have separate ecosystems, but their joint expenses, flow within one another. That is not the case for a lot of the married couples I meet who are 50, 60, and 70s, though there are exceptions. So take that for what you may. But it's very important to know, okay, So do you have one joint account and one joint savings, and then one joint credit card, and all your expenses that you can put on the credit card go on that, and you pay it from the joint checking account in full every month. You pay off the balance, and then the mortgage and housekeeping is, done from the checking account. And when the checking account balance gets too high, we'll move over like 10 grand into savings. That's somewhat of a common refrain I've heard. Rarer, but excitingly so, I hear. Actually, one of our bills is moving 2 grand a month into our savings account off the top, and that's our, emergency funds. So those are the things that I'm looking for, essentially. I can talk about, at a certain point, long enough into marriage, it may make sense to fully integrate your finances. So if you want to try that out, the best way is to have a joint credit card, putting one joint bill, Netflix, Hulu, I don't know, onto it, and then opening up a joint checking account and funding it with a particular amount each month from your paychecks, and then paying off that credit card bill. And then building from there, slowly moving more bills over as your comfort level permits. And that can work too. There's no right way. There just isn't. I'd like to think there is, and personal finance books think that there are too. The right way is the way that works. Are your bills being paid? Are you reaching your goals? And does each spouse feel empowered? For an individual household, we may talk about like roommate structures and things like that. Trying to think what else is investments. Risk tolerance can come up. That might be because, for instance, we have a client who's 60% invested in cryptocurrency. It's a little bit more than we would advise, a lot more. But how do they structure it? What are their investment philosophies as well? For instance, where I'm very conservative. I like low fee, diversified index funds, broad-based companies and asset classes that maybe are mostly US based, and a certain percentage of your investable assets invested in that. It could be one ticker symbol that represents all of that, and maybe up to 10 ticker symbols that represents all of that. And, I believe in modern portfolio theory that over any 30-year stretch of time being invested in the S&P 500, it returns well. And it's hard for money managers doing anything different from passive investing in the market, like I've described, to do better. And if they do better, they might also charge a higher fee. So if you can get me a 10% return versus my 8, and again, that's average annual returns. Some years might be 20, some might be negative too. To get 10% instead of 8%, but you're charging me 2, it's a value question. Now with our investment management, which again is standalone and separate from a financial plan, you do get financial planning meetings, and that's a huge value. So how much do you value that advisor in your life in terms of, we haven't called Elizabeth in a while. We have 20 questions about our money. We should probably make a meeting and go over them. And that's it. That's a legitimate actual experience I have with my clients all the time. And I love that. All right, investments, philosophies. We might ask if you have a trust or, basic estate planning. Again, not estate planning attorneys, but there are things that we look for in relation to those. If they say they have minor age children and they haven't done anything, I may send them a link to the California Statutory Will. It's a free PDF with instructions from the California Bar Association. And I can explain to them kind of the quick hits that they might want to consider. They each should have a will. It doesn't require a notary, but it does require 2 witness signatures. It is contestable in probate court. However, guardianship and conservatorship is not contestable on the will. So as far as I'm aware, there may be exceptions, but as far as I'm aware, it is the only way to assign guardianship and conservatorship for your minor age children. So you each should list, ideally, the same person to be the guardian and conservator, so day-to-day and the financials, as one person, and in the same order, because there are 2 backups you can list on each of your wills. Could be good to buddy up with the mommy and me class, other family, and you each can then witness signature each other's wills. Do your research on this. Wills can be updated at any time, and sometimes deciding on that person is the hardest part, the guardian and conservator. So there's also some medical documents to consider. medical directive and living will, or durable power of attorney as well for healthcare as well. Again, broad strokes here on what we're covering. Then we talk about our firm and we talk about the services involved. What's kind of covered. Not all of these will apply to everybody, but certainly most will. So one thing we didn't talk about in the proposal notes was risk management. So what are your insurance policies? Some people have business or equity compensation that's important. Cash flow analysis can be important. What's your budget? Sometimes I'll ask salary, and not always. Maybe salary, maybe total investment assets. And I can walk through, for every $1 million saved by retirement, it's about 30,000 of income, and it'll adjust a little bit up for inflation and lasts about 30 years if it's invested 50% in the market, 50% in fixed income. It's a very rough estimate. There are other calculators to use, but provided you worked most of your working career, maybe you get 30, 40K a year from Social Security, you have $1 million saved, you have 30,000 a year from your investments. This starts to take shape what retirement looks like. And what is retirement? Replacing your work paycheck. I mean, that's how I like to think of it. So sometimes I'll run through some of those tools and that math as and if we can. Let's see. And then, the cost. It's important to be very upfront about the cost, particularly for clients who have fewer assets. I don't just want them to, they can go, I'll even talk with them, oh, you work with Vanguard. Did you know that you could inquire about at least a quick calculation for your retirement through Vanguard? Or your work may have other financial tools and resources that you can use to make some assumptions and estimates. I would definitely start there. Start at your bank. Start at places that you already patron and serve and have maybe fees going to see what they can provide for you. Because I'd much rather give context around those things in a proposal meeting if I needed to and say, this is good, or this is what, you could do, rather than, charging somebody a fee. I mean, I make money, I spend money, I know exactly all my expenses, and I want to make sure that people are achieving their retirement goals. We're pretty clear on the next steps. Certainly, there's timelines involved. And that's about it. So I have some other videos about how people learned about finance in their lives, whether they did or didn't, and how people generally look for a financial advisor otherwise. But this is the first step. After this meeting, I will then email a copy of this proposal as a PDF over to the client. And this solidifies the scope of the engagement, what it all is included in their financial planning, and their fee. It also includes some rough timelines in terms of this is about a 3 to 6 month engagement. It's about 4 to 6 meetings. It feels very much like this Zoom call right now that we're having of questions and answers. And we're really looking to give you both the data and the context and conversation you might need to feel comfortable about how on track you are to achieving your goals. So I hope you enjoyed this. It's a very, passionate topic of mine, and I hope you got something out of it today.